You are listening to the Slow Living Podcast, and I'm your host, Stephanie O'Day. What if I told you that you could truly have the life of your dreams, the life you've always wanted, one filled with abundance, joy, and a sense of purpose? It's absolutely possible, and I see it each and every day with my coaching clients. It all starts with learning how to slow down. You deserve to live the life you've always dreamt about. Let's get started. So if you're a fan of the podcast, you're going to absolutely love the book. Slow Living, Cultivating a Life of Purpose in a Hustle-Driven World is now available wherever books are sold. Buy it for yourself, your children, your friends, and your neighbors. You can get all the juicy details at stephanieoday.com/slow living book. Trust me, this is hands down the best $20 you'll ever spend. Hi there, Slow Down Society. Steph here, and we are on episode 163 of the Slow Living Podcast. And I have a question for you. Are you a perfectionist? And that is what we're going to do a deep dive into today. If you're new here, welcome. Thank you for being here. We have a lot more new listeners thanks to the new book. And I'm pleased and grateful and so immensely just tickled to my core that you found me and that the book is helpful and useful for you. And you've moved on and are now here with us for the podcast. Thank you for everyone who has taken the time to write to me and email me. And thank you so much for the people who take even more time to leave a review for the book on Amazon. Or I think the other one is Goodreads. Either a Goodreads review or an Amazon review really does help me, and it helps other people find the book and then the podcast. So thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Consider yourself loved and hugged. Today, we're going to talk about perfectionism. And perfectionism comes up an awful lot in my real life. And then it also comes up online often. And then with my one-on-one coaching clients, many times people come to me because they feel disorganized or they feel like they're not meeting their goals and they feel behind and they feel like it doesn't matter what they do, it's not good enough. And so they're talking to me and they're saying that they're late for meetings. They feel like their house is a disaster. They're arguing and they're being snippy all the time with their children or with their spouses. And they feel overwhelmed, overworked, and burnt out. And I listen. And I take not nods. I listen and I nod, and then I take notes. And that's what I was trying to say, is that I take notes. And it all kind of boils down sometimes to this question. And I ask, are you a perfectionist? And depending on where you are in your slow living journey, this might be kind of a wake-up call for you. Are you putting off your hopes, your dreams, your goals, because you're waiting to get your ducks in order or your ducks in a row in order to do that? But the best way to get your ducks in a row is to just start getting your ducks in a row. And that is really a difficult thing if you classify yourself or if you identify yourself as a perfectionist. And so that's just really something that I want to talk about with you today. So perfectionism sometimes can be really tricky if you haven't taken the time to go back and sort of sort through your childhood and maybe heal some things with your inner child. And that is something that I walk my coaching clients through, is I start talking about, well, when did you first think you were a perfectionist? Or when did you first think that, or have the idea that it doesn't matter what I do, it's not going to be good enough? Or if it's not going to be perfect, I might as well try. Or anything worth doing is doing well. And kind of think about that. I recently recorded some episodes on learning from memoirs. I have learned an awful lot from memoirs. And then I've also learned from listening to them and reading them of what I don't want to do and how I don't want to parent. And the way the whole book is written and the way the podcast recordings are is the idea that we want something better for you and definitely something better for our children and for the next generation. So if you're already realizing that maybe your anxiety, maybe your fear of failure is coming from perfectionism, and you don't want to pass that trait down to your children, it's just kind of something to really sit with and journal it out. So, perfectionism is especially prevalent in those who have experienced childhood trauma, and particularly if a child's parents or caregivers withheld love, affection, and attention, depending on whether or not you have quote unquote achieved or been productive or have something to show for yourself. And so, when that happens, children are likely to develop the belief that they must work hard because they have to prove themselves for self worth in order to gain love, gain approval, gain affection from their caretakers. And if this is the first time you're hearing this concept, it might be kind of heavy. It might be like, whoa, this is this is really something here. So that's okay. Once you know that perhaps maybe this rings true for you, then that's fantastic because then you can get to the root cause and work through it instead of shove it aside or put it in a dark corner in a closet and worry about it later. Nope. The later is now. Now's the time to do the work. And that is how you quote unquote get all your ducks in a row is by doing the uncomfortable thing. So if thinking about your childhood and if thinking about perhaps maybe you grew up trying to perform, trying to be sort of like that trained SEAL in order to get the gold stars, the accolades, the good grades, and that's how you measured your self-worth. And because of that, now as an adult, you're striving because you're not comfortable just being. There you go. That's your work. Many times people then sort of marry someone or something that reminds them of their childhood. So sometimes through doing some of this like deep dark work, you realize, I accidentally married a spouse who's exactly this way. And now I feel like I have to do things a certain way in order to keep him or her happy or to keep him or her on an even keel. I have to perform or I have to do things the quote unquote right way, or there will be sometimes hell to pay. So just thinking about this because through predicting either your parent or a caregiver's reactions, or maybe your spouses, or for some of us, maybe now in our work environment, maybe it's our bosses, you end up in this hyper vigilant, always on alert stage, which isn't good for you. It's not good for your brain. It's not good for your body because you feel like you have to constantly walk on eggshells and you can't relax your shoulders and you can't just be. And just being you, fully authentic you, is what slow living is all about. Slow living is about figuring out what works for you. Simply look only within. If there were no variables that you couldn't control, such as other people and circumstances outside of your control, what would your ideal life look like? What would your time management be like? Your health, your finances, your household organization, your relationships. How would they look like? And I want you to daydream. And don't dismiss your daydream because that's the perfectionist in you of, oh, okay, well, how we'll never be able to afford that. Or, oh, that's fine for other people if they're Rockefellers, but in the real world stuff, I have to work. Okay. I'm not asking you to dismiss all of those qualifiers, but I'm asking you for right now to put them on pause, to suspend them, to suspend that disbelief that your dream is so far fetched. There's no way it could possibly come true. So you're not even going to bother dreaming. That's not fun. Life is supposed to have fun and sparkle and joy and whimsy in it. And if you find that you aren't able to find that joy and whimsy and sparkle because you're too busy doing things constantly over and over and over again in this kind of hyper vigilant overdrive way in order to perhaps please a parent or please a spouse or please a boss. Pay attention to that. Every once in a while, you can step into that role, but that should not be your everyday reality. And it's just something to do. So if you find that maybe perhaps it's not someone outside of you that is critical of you, and you are a perfectionist or you deem yourself a perfectionist because of like an inner critical voice, that is something else to try and figure out where this inner critical voice came from and what made you think that if you weren't going to be perfect at something or knock it out of the ballpark every single time, it's not worth trying. Um, my children have all done sports, and they have all played soccer. My oldest and my youngest have played soccer the most, and my youngest definitely out of the three the most. My middle one played just for a little while, and she it's funny, she ended up getting a concussion on the soccer field. She ran into another player. And then because of that, it triggered a concussion and a little seizure right in front of us. And so, ironically, we put her in gymnastics thinking that she would be safer in a padded room. And then later realized, oh, okay, so gymnastics is actually very scary and you are much more prone for injury and getting hurt in gymnastics when you're trying to do a flip on a 4-inch wide balance beam. Um, but if you look at sports and you look at sports as a metaphor, um, not everyone will win. And that doesn't mean that they're all losers. And so when I say that, your response is probably, well, no kidding, Steph. Of course they're not losers. But think about that. Think about the messages maybe you're telling yourself or the messages that maybe you're telling your children that if someone is bringing home 98% on a test and your first question is, well, what did you get wrong? And you're paying attention to that, that doesn't feel good. That doesn't make a kid feel proud. That makes a kid feel like the only thing you're going to pay attention to is that 2% that they got wrong. I once was in the bleachers at a track meet for my oldest when she was doing high school track. And God, I heard someone behind me and I never turned around to look because we live in a small town. So if I turned around to look, it would have been obvious. And I really didn't want to know who this person was. But I heard them say something like, go. And then the kid's name, go, go, go. You're almost there. You're almost gonna win. And you need to come in first. You don't want to be second because second is the first loser. And all these other parents around kind of laughed and cheered and it just felt so horrible for me listening to that because I am a very empathetic person, but do I've got this background in child development and psychology. And that's just such a horrible motivator for anyone, and especially a child, to think that coming in second place means you're the first loser. So if you have that kind of tone in your brain already right now, start to shift that. Start to be nicer. Start to be more compassionate to yourself. And then also start to realize that you probably don't want to raise a generation of fully anxious, nervous children who are scared to be around you because they might be doing something wrong. For the longest time, I had kind of a debilitating loop in my head. And this was especially true in the beginning days when I was building the crockpot site. I worked a lot. Um, it was really important for me that the crockpot site made money, made an income, because I had to prove to myself and to my husband that I could make a legitimate income from home while staying home with the kids. So I did have to work, but I never really gave myself the opportunity to celebrate my wins. And I never relaxed to the extent that I certainly relax now. Now I give myself lots of permission to take breaks and relax and take naps. But I had to get to that point where I felt like I was going to like legit freak out. It was because this voice in my head kept telling me, you'll have fun when the work is done. And the problem is, and especially anyone out there who's running a small business, the work is never done. The work is never done. That you will always find more, and that's true for anything and everything. There's always more laundry to fold. There's always something else that can be cleaned. There is always more writing I could be doing. More phone calls and reaching out. There's always a family member that I haven't checked in on that I should uh, check in on. And so I was delaying my own self needs and self care in order to work. And it didn't feel good. And so I'm so thankful and grateful that it didn't take a huge health emergency to wake me up and snap me out of it. I did have a panic attack on the freeway, and I talk about that in one of the first few episodes when I share my slow living story. But at the time, I had gotten fired because I didn't want to write about a pressure cooker cookbook. My grandma was not doing well. She was in the hospital, or just not doing well. Maybe she wasn't. But anyway, it was a lot of pressure in my body that it didn't matter what I was doing. It wasn't going to be good enough. And so I ended up having this panic attack. And I don't want that for any of you. And I want you to not use I'm a perfectionist as a badge of honor. I want you to look as I'm a perfectionist as, whoa, this is not healthy. This is not correct. This is not right. And this is my wake up call. I want you to have a before and an after. And your after needs to be where you're not chasing one arbitrary goal and that's it, and forgetting everything else. I don't want your relationships to be collateral damage because you're too hyper focused on one marker of success. A healthy life, a long life, a life worth living is filled with lots of different things. And you don't need to always be on. You don't need to always go, go, go. Okay. I have mentioned these books before. I will mention them again, and we can link to them in the show notes. But if you think some of the stuff I talked about kind of healing that inner child, and you haven't taken the time to realize that maybe, just maybe, some of these negative thoughts that you're having are stemming from your childhood, or something that wasn't met along the way. A good one is called Running on Empty: Overcome Your Childhood Emotional Neglect. And that is by Jonas Webb, Webb. The other one that I really like, and I have my coaching clients read, is called The Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents: How to Heal from Distant, Rejecting, or Self-Involved Parents. And that's by Lindsay C. Gibson. Another thing that might happen is when you realize and you start to go back and do different things, if you were constantly maybe shamed or tried to be put in a particular box or mold of which you didn't fit, and you think perhaps maybe there's a little bit of neurodivergency there, or a little bit of ADHD, or a little bit of something, which is kind of leading to this perfectionism where I have to do things this way and this way only. And if I don't do it this way, my entire world will crumble around me, which sometimes some perfectionists have that thought. Maybe reading a little bit about differences in brains would be helpful or useful to you. And so one of the books that I do enjoy reading is called Driven to Distraction: Recognizing and Coping with Attention Deficit Disorder from Childhood Through Adulthood. And that is by Edward M. Hallowell and John J. Rady. And so we will link to those in the show notes. The new book, Slow Living: Cultivating a Life of Purpose in a Hustle-Driven World, takes you step by step through crafting out the life that you have designed, your ideal life, your dream life, your version of a life well lived. And we break it down so you have a nice, big, overarching dream, a vision. And then we reverse engineer it. So you've got a 3-year plan, a 1-year kind of resolution of reinvention, and then 30-day challenges, and then from there, daily habits. You can do this. You absolutely can live the life of your dreams in a slow, steady, and sustainable way. And you do not need to do it perfectly, because there is no such thing. Okay, pretty people, consider yourself loved and hugged. I think you're amazing and wonderful. I'm so proud of you. And I will be back in your earbuds next week. Do you have a slow living story to share? Leave me a voicemail at stephanieodea.com/podcast with any questions, comments, feedback, or testimonials, and I will be sure to include it in an upcoming episode. Also, if you found value in this episode, please share it with your family and friends and subscribe through your favorite podcast provider. The more you share, comment, and leave positive reviews, the more people we can reach and share the slow living lifestyle and messaging. Thank you, Slow Down Society, and have an absolutely wonderful day.